Anyways, back to the postmodern types. Well, you know, this all was revealed in such painful detail that even the kind of closed-minded ideologue that Norman referred to just couldn't quite muster up the moral courage to keep beating the same damn drum. So what they did instead, being highly intelligent individuals, was play a game of sleight of hand and transformed these Marxist presuppositions into postmodernism in the 1970s. And the idea basically was, well, the working class isn't going to rise up and crush the bourgeoisie because, first of all, they're getting rich, and that wasn't supposed to happen. And second, well, it sort of seemed to be a catastrophe when that occurred, let's say, in Russia. And so maybe we won't do that anymore because the working class actually isn't buying into this either, which is also a problem. You know, having internalized their own oppression, they wouldn't buy into this, to the global myth of utopia. So maybe it's because they had some sense. It's certainly possible. But anyways, the sleight of hand was, oh, well, fine, we'll just play a different oppressor versus oppressed game, and we'll introduce identity politics. It's like, okay, you're not being oppressed because you're a member of the working class, you're being oppressed because you're a woman. Or you're being oppressed because you have an ethnicity that's outside the main paradigm, whatever that might be. Or it's because of your sexual preference or your sexual identity, whatever places you in some manner outside the normative culture. And you know, the thing is, the postmodernists, you know, you might think, well, your culture is good for something. It gives you a hierarchy of value. It rewards competent people. It gives you a direction so you can climb up, you know, because otherwise everything's leveled to nothing, and then why do anything? Well, they don't care about any of that. They don't believe that there's any such thing as competence. They don't believe that there's any such thing as up. This is all, postmodernism wipes all of that out. And so when the postmodernists analyze a text, all they care about is how it privileges the position of the author and who it oppresses. And that's the only thing they regard as real. And they don't believe in grand unifying narratives. They don't believe that there's a Canadian identity. They don't believe that there's an American identity. They don't believe that there's a Western identity. They don't believe that value structures exist, or if they are, they're irreplaceable with some other value structure. They certainly don't believe that they have any biological grounding, that there's any such thing as a human being. It's all socially constructed, which is really convenient if what you want to do is be the author of an entirely social constructed utopia that you can run. And then when the Marxists say, well, that wasn't real Marxism, what it really means, and I've thought about this for a long time, it's the most arrogant possible statement anyone could ever make. It means, if I would have been in Stalin's position, I would have ushered in the damn utopia instead of the genocidal massacres, because I understand the doctrine of Marxism and everything about me is good. It's like, well, think again, sunshine. You don't understand it. You don't understand it. And you're not that good. And if the power was in your hands, assuming you had the competence, which you don't, you wouldn't have done any better. And even if you had, there would have been someone else waiting right behind you to shoot you the first time you actually tried to do anything good. And that's what happened to all the old guard who ran the damn revolution. Stalin rounded them all up and shot them, along with their families and millions of other people. So even if you do happen to be that avatar of moral purity that you claim implicitly, the probability that you'd get to act out your goodness in relationship to those possessed by your ideology is zero. So there's so, you know, you think, well, why are these postmodernists doing what they're doing? Why do they oppose the patriarchy? Here's a question. Why don't the feminists complain about Saudi Arabia? It's like, you know, Gad Saad, who's this guy at Concordia who is in a business school, so he can actually say what he thinks now and then. He tweeted yesterday, well, he tweeted to the Women's March, you know, because there's a little Twitter thing, you could do that, I suppose, for the organizers, and he said, why don't you go to the Middle East and have a nice march against Saudi Arabia and see how that works out for you? It's like, so you think, well, why not? Like, why not? Why are the radical leftists who are so much for rights everywhere? That's what they say. Why aren't they complaining about Saudi Arabia, for example, which, you know, breeds a particularly pathological form of ideologically rigid Islam that basically enslaves their women? That's to put it properly. It's like, why not complain about that? Well, how about this? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so when push comes to shove, you see how much concern there is among the radical feminists for the rights of women. It's like if the pushing those rights forward doesn't also at the same time undermine the Western patriarchy, then we'll take the undermining and leave the damn rights behind. And so there's an insight for you about exactly what's going on at the bottom of all this. So, okay, so then there's another weird thing, and I've already sort of hit on it tangentially. It's like, well, the postmodernists don't believe in grand unifying narratives. They don't believe in narratives at all. They don't care about value because they never noticed that you have to value something in order to have some hope in life, right? Because when you value something, you're pursuing it, and in the pursuit, that's where the meaning in life is, you know, because the rest of it's suffering. If you're trying to struggle upwards towards the light, it's like, well, that's something to motivate you and to protect you against the suffering. But the postmodernists don't care about any of that, and I would say it's because they don't care about suffering. So, all right, so here's the final question. It's like, well, if the postmodernists don't care about grand unifying narratives and they don't believe in identity, why in the world are they willing to believe in gender identity and sexual identity and racial identity and ethnic identity? And the answer to that is, well, they can't, but they don't care because coherence isn't on their agenda. And besides that, when push comes to shove, their postmodernism is nested inside a deeper Marxism, and so when the postmodern narrative doesn't suffice, say, to push forward the idea that Western civilization should be overturned, they just revert back to the overarching Marxism and say, well, those people are oppressed and that's a bad thing. It's like you might say, well, you're a postmodernist. It's like, you don't believe in any of that. And they say, well, yeah, I'm only a postmodernist this deep, but underneath that there's a Marxism, and I can always rely on that to fill in the gaps, and that's exactly what's happening.